Welcome to the Bigfoot Cafe. What's on the menu? Everything.
It's food for thought.
Hello and welcome to the Bigfoot Cafe. Hope everyone's doing all right out there tonight. With me, as always, my co-host Jay Birch. How are you, Jay?
I'm good, thank you. I'm glad to see everybody's here in the chat. Our normals, Batwoman, we've got Pat in the chat. Happy to see everyone else. I wish I could give you all a shout out. I don't have the time, okay? I love all of you, though. Thank you for coming.
We might find the time. The time to say hello to a few of them on the way. Our guest tonight, people, I think everyone's going to recognise him from the researchers report on Wednesday over on Bigfoot Odyssey. It was a fascinating chap to talk to, and I wanted to get together with him again and talk a bit more about, because we only scratched the surface, but it's Gary Spikes. How you doing, Gary?
How you doing? Excited. This has been a crazy week for a simple little country boy from Oklahoma. I've been getting all kinds of attention.
Well, it's all good. We'll talk about your P3 productions in a bit. Before we start, I need to give a shout out to the Bat Mom because she's not been well, and I hope she's feeling better and going to be better soon. And also, I had a message. I had like smoke signal message all the way from Ruger Ridge. And he's struggling with his internet. They have no internet, and he just wanted to give a shout out to everyone to say that hopefully he'll be back online soon, and that he misses you all, and that we all miss him and Mrs. Ruger Ridge. So that's a shout out to them. So let's get into it. Gary, you had a really scary encounter. I'm not going to ask you to go through it all again. People can go and check out you at the researchers report if they want a detailed account. I mean, we can talk about bits of it if you want, but that's all we got to talk about. And I wanted to ask you more about what you thought this creature was and what you feel about, people talk about structures and glyphs and all these things. So that's kind of what I want to get into with you if you want to.
Well, you might open up a can of worms there because there's so many different theories and ideas and sometimes us as and I'm going to say it, folks. I'm an enthusiast. I'm not a documented scientific researcher, but I do a scientific formula with what we do here, and I think we all should. But there's so many different theories, you never know where to go with this. And we kind of got into that the other day. I'll put it right out there, right off the bat. I'm a true believer that this is a primal, earthly, earthbound, physical being. I believe that what I've seen and what I've experienced in my experience is he's just like me and you. He's flesh and blood. Even though there is a lot more flesh and a lot more blood involved in these guys.
Yeah, it certainly is. Something I've always thought of is, do you think people massively underestimate the weight of these things?
Oh, God, yeah. Yeah, no doubt. I've tracked these things too much through all different kinds of substrates throughout Oklahoma, Louisiana, Alabama, Mississippi, Arkansas, even up into Montana, Wyoming, even up into your area, Jay. These guys, I honestly think that they don't picture it. You take a full-size pickup, say a Ford F-350 will weigh 6,000 pounds. You put that weight on the ground in 4 different spots. Well, most of the time the weight of that structure is, anywhere from say 6 inches by 10 inches. And it'll only impress in like a good sand. It may impress half an inch. You take one of these guys and you put their foot, a 17-inch track normally is about 6 to 8 inches across. If you measure them, if on the general scale of what everybody says. And if you're putting all that weight on one side, well, you figure a car divided by 4, if it's 6,000 pounds, you're talking 12 to 1,500 pounds per tire. Well, if you take one of these guys, they're pushing down just as much. So we've literally, looked at tires and seen on roadways, the tracks. They're pushing down as much as these cars are. I think these guys will run, 800 plus easy. A good 8 or 9 footer. You're talking, 600-800 pounds. And if you get the bigger guys, guys down here where we're at, I've seen some tracks 17, 18 inches, and that deep in river sand, which is hard packed. Of course, depends on the wetness of the sand. You're pushing 1,000 pounds or more. A lot bigger than I want to tangle with.
Oh yeah, you often hear people saying, "Yeah, he looked about 268." I think where have they come with that figure from? To be so precise with these numbers. But I always think about the muscle mass as well. I mean, they must to have that strength. They must have some. If
we go down the primate road, the average male chimpanzee weighs 80 to 120 pounds, and they say they're 4 times stronger than a human. I've seen direct evidence of chimpanzee violence and strength, and if you multiply that according to a dominant big male silverback gorilla, they say they're 6 to 8 times stronger than a human. And then you put what I seen, shoulders this broad with nothing but muscle. You're talking, it does not surprise me. You see the pictures of the trees in Alaska and the Pacific Northwest where they're ripped up, turned upside down, and stuck back in the same hole. It's just massive amounts of strength.
What did you think the height was?
On mine?
Over 6 foot.
When he stood up, we figured, I could do it here because, we knew how tall the truck was. When he stood up, the top of the truck hit him about right here. And the top of the truck was 6 foot. So we're figuring, 9 plus, 9.5, probably closer, maybe even a little over 10. And when you took his stride patterns, I told you he covered 38 feet in 3 strides. He's a big boy. He was, which is kind of uncommon, in all the researchers know that, you see a lot of them that size up in the Pacific Northwest. Usually down here in Oklahoma, you don't get a lot of reports of them being that big, but I do know the size of his track.
He must have been jumping. He must have been springing to reach.
Well, if you
what do you think the reach is a step?
What it was. Let's see, 38 divided by 3. 12 feet. Now you figure from him doing a standing position where I was at, and I heard 3 dramatic steps, and then we seen the 3 impacts, and then he hit the brush. So he did it literally in 4 steps because he was planted here 1, 2, 3, and then in the brush.
Wow.
So you're looking at a 9 to 10 foot stride. So he was moving, and he was moving. He covered that in maybe a second. It's just boom, boom, boom through the brush.
Yeah. Sounds incredible, doesn't it?
Was that a run? Gary, do you think it was a run? Or
I did not see that part. I was in the pickup. You'd have to kind of catch the show. We was out researching, and I fell asleep across the seat of my truck and woke up with him looking in my driver's side window. And we measured from where my tracks was, kind of a funny story, but we measured from where my tracks was when we went back to where my truck was. I put my truck back there, and that's where we measured. And he was moving. I don't know if he was running or if I didn't physically see him because as he was going that way, I was trying to find my keys and get out of the area as fast as I could.
I'm surprised. What do you feel about structures then?
I used to not be, even long before I had my sighting, was not big on structures. But the more I'm finding, literally the saying I say is the more I find out, the less I think I know. I'm seeing so many commonalities from the Pacific Northwest, like we was talking about Nate Rudd and all them guys up there around y'all, up by Stevens Lake and stuff like that, all the way down here in Oklahoma. I've seen so many. I've got pictures after pictures after pictures all the way down into Louisiana, and there is a commonality with a lot of structures with the target species. I do think that me being in the position that I'm in the survival world and the bushcraft world, we can discern in between snowfall and woodfall. We call it windwoodfall, because the tornadoes coming through in the winds. Here in Oklahoma, everybody thinks of tornadoes, but it's not so much tornadoes as it's straight line winds. We'll just fold them over. But there's a lot of uncommonalities, even down to little stuff, like we're finding little triangles woven in together laying on stumps, and literally it sounds like something from the Blair Witch Project, but it's true. You find little like crazy little symbols, just like somebody had played together, but out in the middle of nowhere, just hanging on a little tree limb. I don't know where to go with that yet.
Are you finding, are these, how are you collecting, how are you collecting data? Is this the sort of thing you're logging and seeing if people are...
I usually, myself and my guys, I say my guys, it's just a group we're from all over the nation. Nate's one of them now, but we kind of call us the band of brothers, but we got them from New York all the way down into Louisiana, me here in Oklahoma, all the way out to Nate in the Pacific Northwest. But we're logging time of day, where we find them, taking pictures of them, and what kind of activity we're having in correlation with that area. That's the big thing, I think, for me, is if anybody's out researching and they find a structure, to dig in and try to find all the correlative reports and what the behavioral patterns is around that structure, to where we can hopefully, over a period of time, when we all gather up this information, because we are finding similarities from the Pacific Northwest all the way down back into the Northeast, a lot of similarities here. Hopefully we can correlate what structure comes from what behavior. Or did I say that right, or did I say that backwards? No,
I think that sounded all right. Yeah. It's fascinating, isn't it? There's the people are finding, like you say, the big things, and then it's the little things, the woven stuff, and it's just, how do we make sense?
You really don't.
And
I tell you, one of the most strange things that we are finding, and we just did a show on it probably about a month ago, and this sounds crazy, but we've got 5 guys from 5 different areas that we, in our own personal, that none of us actually knew each other prior to maybe a year and a half ago. But we are finding in the Pacific Northwest, a lot of the tree structures are lateral bends, almost like a wigwam. We're finding in the Pacific Northwest, Jay, with a lot of the lateral bends, a lot like your hoopus type structures. In the Midwest, ranging all the way up through Nebraska, on the plains down here in Oklahoma, we're finding a lot of teepee style structures. Now go figure. There is some up in the other areas too, but the bulk of stuff we're finding around my area is the teepee style structures. So it's so weird how it kind of correlates with the same thing that the First Nations people was doing of the area in the past.
What do you think, Jay?
Well, I live in an area close to Mount St. Helens, and I can take you up there and show you where it's just so too close to the road type of stuff. But these are some of the things I just want people to be aware, and I trust you, Gary. And one of the biggest reasons why I do is because you're a bushman, that you're a survivor. But these, I could take you to a place up by a place called Blue Lake on Mount St. Helens, where everything looks like a Sasquatch. And all it is caused from is we have such high winds here that it's unbelievable. And the snow and it just, everything you see online is the same stuff that I even that structure in Canada that was so popular for so long, dude, that's only like 30 feet, if that far, off the side of the road. So I can't imagine Sasquatch. Now, if you're going, I want people to be aware of that. If you walked out 10 miles into the woods, someone else could have walked out 10 miles in the woods. But there are things that can't be explained that I agree with you. What's up with the teepee structures when man can't pick up the type of logs that are being used? And then up here in the Pacific Northwest, we have what's called rock piles. And those are rocks stacked up in a certain way that 3 or 4 guys together cannot lift up. So, and you find that sometimes way deep in the forests.
Absolutely. We're just now getting that. A very good friend of mine, and to me, kind of a mentor, Shane Carpenter out of Missouri. Miss Daniela knows him well, are finding actual rock structures out in the middle of nowhere in creeks. And it's funny because they all seem to kind of lead you towards the creek. there is a method to this madness. And if we could just gleam, this is my whole motivation of it. Yeah. If we could gleam through behavioral reports, finding out what they're doing and lock it in to maybe this structure here and this, I think that would get us over this next hump in our research as a group, as a community of being able to get the awareness out there. That's my whole goal in this is to get that awareness out there.
Part of it, Gary, too, is we need to share each other's information.
Absolutely.
I don't care about copywriting anything that I find. We should be sharing it together, all of us, so that we can, those of you that want to get to the bottom of it or whatever can do that. I'm not that guy. I don't care. Since I've seen them, I know they're there, so I don't need to prove anything or have them proven. But I do think that if we could just share the knowledge, that something would open up for all of us that are trying to do this. So.
Absolutely. Primate Objective, of course, we all know who that is, had a good point. Says there's a community of people that build structures in the woods. Me being part of that community, we know. And I don't know how many structures, like you said, you come off of a road, or even here in Oklahoma, it's bad. There's a certain, folks saying, "Oh, this is a Bigfoot structure," and it's inside a public park, and you go in and you can see the axe marks where they laid up a little bushcraft, because it's becoming so popular with guys like Les Stroud and Bear Grylls and Dave Canterbury, one of the greatest in my books. Mr. Dave Canterbury trained me, great guy. Les Stroud, great guy. But anyways, that it's, like you said, you can see the nuances of human-made structures, where these things are a little bit more meticulous. I hate to say it, and please, nobody take me the wrong way, but with what I've seen of the true structures that I've seen, and like I said, I'm still not into a lot of them, but I'm learning more as time goes. It is almost crazy how meticulous these guys are on how they lay everything. Everything's just got to be perfect, and I've only seen that in one other human capability, and that's and please, when I say this wrong, and I'm not saying that they have this, but the same characteristics as people that's got autism, how they're so focused on the one thing. And that's where, to me, if it's random, I usually chalk it off for wind. But if it's meticulous and woven over each other and stuff, then it's got to be bushcraft or the target species. But I'm sorry, when it's a log this big and it's 30 feet long.
It's the simple things. It's the simple things that you can deduce. Just because something's woven doesn't mean an 8 foot, 800-pound creature did it. But when you find something where trees are literally woven into trees,
yes,
we have to ask ourselves, number one, can I do that? And then number two, who did it or how was it done? And I think if we think more on that line, someone asked the question, well, Jay, if they're wanting to watch us, well, if you're building, you can see all of them is what the point out. You can see them clearly. Absolutely. Off the side of the road. That's not camouflage, folks. That's like someone built a little house right there. That's what I'm saying is that stuff that's right off the road. And most of every single thing that I've ever personally found is just bushcraft.
Well, I mean, I don't want to put a spanner in the works here, so I'm just suggesting it. But are we not putting like the cart before the horse by studying structures when we don't know whether they're making them and what's making them? Are we focusing too much on the things we think they may do and not actually trying? I mean, are we trying to find Bigfoot? I mean, this is the thing. Are you out there looking to find some evidence? Where's your research? Where are you wanting to go with your research? I know that's quite a big open question.
No, that's a question that I get a bunch, and I'll put it very simply on how I am a tracker. I track things. When I track things, I learn. I can learn in a trail when I step on a person's trail, their physical attributes, their physical injuries, their psychological patterns, how they eat, how they sleep. anybody or anything, an animal. I did a show a while back, a tutorial on some tracking and collecting evidence that we're putting aside, and I literally called out one of the guys because he had put one of his tracks down, and it was just a picture of his track. I said, one of two things happened in that, and Jay, you'll get a kick out of this. I said, you either planted with your right foot and then shifted and stepped off to the left at about a 45-degree angle, or you've got an injured right ankle that's causing your foot to roll out because of the way the track looked. That's the kind of information that we can disdain from a good track. That's the reason I tell people all the time, please, 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 if you find a track that's castable, go ahead and cast that track, but be very careful how you're moving around that area and go find the others. If you found one, you're going to find another, something else, depending on your skill set. But with the structures, I'm like you. I always didn't take much for structures, but when I'm finding a trail and I know that it's the target species and I'm walking halfway up a ridge and I see a little structure bent over and some trees laid over kind of funky, and you can literally see where it crawled up underneath there halfway up the ridge, looking down at a game trail 20 yards below it, and it can go 10 yards straight up over the ridge and get away. It has the three major factors for me. It's setting halfway up a ridge, so the thermals, and it's not highlighted, it can catch the thermals from below. That's one of the oldest tricks in the books for us hunters. Plus, hot air rises, it's going to push its scent back up over the ridge, but yet it's not on the ridge, so it's not what I call highlighted, backlighted, and they always have a route of escape. You'll always notice that their main hole is always heading up the ridge, because if the wrong thing comes down the trail, they'll turn up over the ridge, they're gone. When I'm seeing that and seeing these structures that's bent like this, and I'm going to give a chalk out for that. The guy that really got me thinking about this, I haven't talked to in probably 3 years, but his name's Mark Daniels. He's not in the big name. He's not out there putting his name out there, but common sense. He said, look at it. It's the same thing you would do if you was watching. He goes, Gary, you're trained military. Is this not where you'd set up an ambush? And I'm like, yeah. That's where I go with the structures. If I can really find out, and that's the key point of, if you find a structure, get the reports, talk to local people, or set on that, get the information, the behavioral patterns around it, because half of these structures, like Mr. Birch was saying, is BS, or they're so old that the target species is not there. But if you find a fresh structure, you might want to stay on that thing a little bit, put a camera up or something, because they have a tendency to come back to them. They're there for a reason. Sorry, I got on a rant.
Oh, no,
that's fine. That's get it better out than in. What do you feel? Let's go to your training. I mean, how did you get? What's your training? The tracking that you say. How did you get into all that?
Being raised in Oklahoma we had a pretty large farm, and being a sportsman, I'm like a fourth and fifth generation veteran. I'm also like fourth and fifth generation farmer. We love to hunt. My dad was a great tracker, but I found I had a knack, and I loved the outdoors at a young age. And God rest his soul, my grandfather was a World War II vet, but he was also an outdoorsman. But he retired from the Air Force when I was like 12, 13 years old, and they pretty much raised me. But every summer before, when I'd get out of school, he would, I'd pay for half of it and he'd pay for half of it. And we'd pick a state. We'd go to Colorado, Washington. I've been up Mount St. Helens area. We'd go to Alaska and just go hunting, go outdoors. But I told you, at a young age, at 10 and 12 years old, they seen that I had a knack and a love for it. And they put me in programs like Upward Bound, where they teach you wilderness survival and all that. But I always got good at tracking, and I've always had dogs with me, and went in the military, served my terms in the military. I won't get too much into that. I don't need to talk about that too much. That's there. Spent 8 years, did some combat, but I was infantry. I was airborne. It just, everything is weird. Everything in my life was always focused upon being outdoors. And of course, my research as time goes too. When I came back, I was working in the oil field. And in our family, you're either oil field, Army, or armed forces, or you work in Oklahoma. Everybody knows Oklahoma has more prison systems in them than any other state in the capital, in the United States. And my uncle was a warden, and he knew I could track, and they started contracting me for the Oklahoma Department of Corrections as a tracker. And I also did search and rescue with my dogs. So it just kind of led from there, and I was good at it, and I enjoyed it, and it was pretty lucrative. I mean, we made a little bit of money. You don't work all the time, but when you work and get paid good. And it just, everything kind of toned together in my life. I was one of the blessed ones of having a very patriotic and country family, and just being able to acquire the skills. And there's a lot of trackers out here, folks, that are a lot better than me. I mean, these guys down on the Border Patrol, they're training these Border Patrol agents that are a lot better than me. And that's what I teach, even with the wilderness survival and primitive life skills, is your skill set's what sets the tone,
Oh. Is there any sort of scent that, I mean, I don't know if you've ever thought of this or done it, can the dogs pick up anything around the structures? Any scent?
I don't know. I mean, you can look on my channel, folks, and you can see my dog. My dog is all over it. He's a very special dog. And he's my research partner, because I believe dogs have a far greater skill set than we do, and the genetic abilities. But I'm telling you, I've had all kinds of dogs, and I've put them on these guys' trails that I know are Sasquatch trails. And I would say almost 90% of them, except for this dog here, just lock up. They know there's a fight or flight in them.
Right.
They just lock up. This dog here, I do not let him off the leash. When we're in an active area, he does not get 3 foot from me, because these animals are known to not like dogs. And there's a reason for that, because dogs will let people know. Look at the First Nations people, all the First Nations people, and First Nations straight across the board. Even your Germanic tribes use dogs tremendously. The Germanic tribes fought the Romans in Hadrian's Wall and used warhounds. That's where the bloodhound came from, was from the Roman and Germanic wars. And that's my favorite breed of dog outside of my Malinois, the bloodhounds. One of the oldest definable breeds of dogs there is, and they was bred for that. So we know that the accompaniment of man and dog together is bad for the target species.
But you had an interesting account, didn't you, Jay, with the dogs?
Yeah, coon hunting. Yeah, believe it or not, Washington State, we can coon hunt. And I had walker hounds and a plot hound, and my buddy who we were hunting together, he had straight plot hounds. Yeah. And our dogs, it was a deep fog. I mean, one of those ones where we were barely creeping in the truck, and we had glow sticks on our dogs, and we come around a corner in the Yakult burn, and we could see their glow sticks, and they were just sitting around, milling around. And so we stopped the truck, and I got out and I put the million candle power spotlight out, and I looking at them. Then I was raising it up, and then all of a sudden there's these eyes looking right at us. No trees. There's no trees. It's a Yakult burn, and it was way up there, 7.5, 8 feet, and very calm. It stared right back at us, and it was blinking. Its eyes were blinking. And my friend was freaking out, because I always talked about the areas we'd go had Sasquatch in them and stuff, and he just thought I was full of crap. But those dogs weren't upset. They weren't whining. They at one point, one of them even put its paws up on it, and that's the only time it moved like this and looked down, and then right back to the camera. I don't know how to explain that. I don't know, but I know that if it was an elk or a deer, the elk would have kicked. There's nothing else it could have been. Yeah. And the thing is with hound dogs is they don't bark at humans. Coon dogs won't bark at humans. They only bark at animals. Mm-hmm. And owning a hound dog is like owning a wild animal that you've got a little bit of control of.
That's true.
It's the truth.
Yeah, it is.
And they're not the kind that sit and roll over and watch the house or any of that. So My buddy was freaking out though. He kept asking me if that was a Sasquatch, and I kept saying, "Nah, it's got to be an elk or this or that." But he kept pointing out that the elk would have killed them dogs, would have kicked them to death, and how elk don't blink when they're in a spotlight. And we never poached. We weren't poaching. We were coon hunters, and deer and elk. That's true. Their eyes never blink. Because we've seen millions of them when we're coon hunting. Your monster deer and your monster elk are out at 3 o'clock in the morning. And that was just, I wish that we would have pulled forward, but it was there for like 15 minutes. And then it just, we could not see any shape of any kind of a body. We couldn't even see our dog, just those glow sticks and those eyes. And it finally just turned and,
it's funny you say that, because with what research I've done, the behavioral patterns up there and down here are so different. Up there, they don't seem to be as aggressive as they are down here, because you do have more great open expanse. But in just what you tell me there, I've had a lot of dogs. I've had probably 50 good running walking dogs. I love the plots. I love the blue ticks, but my favorite, of course, is always the bloodhounds. But that shows an intelligence of whatever was standing there, like you said, looking down at the dogs and acknowledging the dogs, and the dog's not afraid of it. Down here, we get it just the opposite. I mean, our dogs, I've let my coon hounds out, and I do got to say one thing: is there not nothing more beautiful than hearing that ball chop up?
I do. I miss it. God, I miss it.
There's just something about that. Whoa!
Yep.
But I've let them out, and they run out in the woods and be gone and bawl and chop and start to tree and then yelp and then run back and beat us back to the truck, jump in the truck, crawl up in the dog box and just lay there quivering. Down here, it's different. I don't know, maybe because like Danielle was saying, as you saying, we're encroaching on their terrain and stuff a lot more, but they seem to be a lot more waspy down here.
Well, all I saw was brown in front of me, a brown wall.
I would say a wall, definitely. Folks, people don't understand. Jay, I don't know if you listened to it. I had an 88 Chevy 3/4 ton pickup, and his shoulders, when he was looking in that window, his shoulders stuck out past I could see it in the rear glass, and his other shoulder in the windshield. He literally covered that whole cab of that truck going sideways. His shoulders easily had to been 4.5 feet wide. Just crazy. I'm just, in my life, I can't get it out of my head. I'm afraid the next time that I see one might be even worse, because just knowing what we're all searching for, and that's.
Well, the one that chased my wife and I, it also had a very bad attitude, but I've come full circle in that, realizing that I was a lot to blame in that. That part of it took a long time for me to get over and get well with what happened, but I also had to realize that I was part of that problem.
Absolutely.
And, but I guess when I just don't like to think a lot about how massive it was. It was
you just try to focus on the other thing.
I can't describe it properly, because it's still, it'll take me back to a place I don't want to be. I'm good now, but I don't. That scares me.
You still don't go back there. Yeah.
I go back to that exact spot. My wife and I, that's our favorite place. We go back there all the time. I've taken people there and everything, but that going back in my mind, I don't like so much, because I still can't get over. It's too unreal for me still to try to understand how I don't understand how that could be out there. And I
think you brought up a real good point.
Yeah,
of course, with every species out there, there are always one bad eggs. But I honestly believe, just like with a dog, I train dogs pretty much for a living now. And of course, I'm disabled, a veteran, but I train dogs for people. And when me and Miss Daniela had a wonderful conversation about her little snuggle puppy. I just love that little thing. So sweet. But when you start reaching into the psyche of training these dogs, 90% of the time you can take it back. If you could break it down, it was human error that caused them to have these bad traits. And I think with this species too, they're so intelligent. What I looked at in the face was intelligent. It was cognitively. It literally, when people tell me that these things can communicate, I believe it. When people tell me that these things look at you and start thinking like you can see that when they're that's the truth, folks, because these things are smart. So when you get a bad experience or you get an aggressive one, I honestly believe it's like we used to call the old rogue bears up in the Pacific Northwest that, once you shoot them or they get that taste of blood, they just turn, it's always a human stimulus that causes these things to go aggressive, because that thing, when he looked at me, I don't think he was being aggressive. I think he was more curious, but he don't have to be aggressive.
That's right.
He's that big. He made me. I'm telling you, man. I've seen combat, and it didn't scare me as bad as that. I still have nightmares. After I did that show with them, I went in there and hugged my wife and thanked God that I'm still here. Y'all get me excited. Sorry, I got that microphone too close. But people don't understand. It will make you rethink your existence on this planet.
And the thing is, people need to understand, we're not telling a story. It's not, people always want to hear my story. I'm not trying to tell a story. I'm basically still trying to find out what happened, what it was that went wrong. That I'm not trying to tell a story. I'm reaching out, hopefully, to eventually, I'm very, very well now. I'm very well mentally and all that, but I'm not satisfied. I need more.
Absolutely. So you have questions.
I do.
I told Miss Danielle, and you'll get a kick out of this, you have an experience that you had. It literally, I was not drinking any of the time that any of my stuff happens, because one of the rule I have is I don't drink when I'm squashing, but it scared me sober. I haven't touched it since. It also scared me away from my religion and made me embrace another religion that embraces the existence of these guys. Because all my life being raised, and I'll say it, being raised up Pentecostal, I'd mention this stuff to my grandparents and stuff, and they'd all, well, if it is, it's of the devil. And that just drives me nuts. What I seen is not of the devil. I'm saying they can be the devil. If you piss them off enough, they're going to rip you apart, rip anybody apart. And man, if we ever went up, I hear these, I love how Pat puts it. He says, it would take a fully loaded team of Navy SEALs to take one down. Honestly, that's probably the truth, because like I said, this thing's massive, but I don't think they're evil. I think they have the capability, just like any animal or any human.
Yeah, a bear will rip you apart if you go near kids, and any animal will do that. So they're just normal traits. But we're kind of imposing these this perception of Bigfoot.
Absolutely.
Either the big fluffy thing or the big scary thing. Well, yeah, he's going to be scary. I get the impression you look at him, you're scared. But is he trying to be scary? Probably not.
No,
Probably
he just wants to survive
his day. Yeah. So that's just, for me.
You think of it this way. Me being a matter of fact, I had a very good conversation. He's on here tonight, Mr. Patrick Vaughn. Now you talk about another tracker. I look up to this guy. This guy's very passionate, and he had a long-term relationship to the point that the group knows him well enough. Every time he goes in there, they interact with him. And he has proven it to me beyond a shadow of doubt in his experiences with me. But make a long story short, we had a long conversation today, and he says, you look at it this way, Gary. He said, they're the true survivalists. They have watched us for generations and generations. And you just look at what's happening in our world today. Well, do you not think that at one time they're going to start fighting back? Because they're going to have to. Because we keep encroaching, keep destroying their livelihood. Look at every other animal on the planet. It's a law of survival. Yep. I just don't want to be on the receiving end of that.
I've missed the question. I wanted to get it before they run out, because once they get to the top, they go. But it was Raptor Crazy, and I think they asked you if anybody contacts you to go tracking Bigfoot that they've found.
Oh, yeah.
Tell us about
that. Not as much now, since I've kind of got out of a lot of the communities. And folks, you have to understand, I'm a very skeptical believer. I mean, half the stuff that people say is Bigfoot's not Bigfoot. I mean, and you can prove it real easy. But I do get called out. Like I was telling you, I'm going to have to go out in the morning to do some tracking, to just go prove somebody very special to me that he's not thinking right. But yeah, we get called out every now and then. I've been called to southeastern Oklahoma. We got my lovely wife is always went with me. I've got a very rambunctious and very well versed wife when it comes to shooting. I taught her how to shoot. And yes, folks, we are not pro kill, but we are pro protect. Oh. And especially with having our dog is such a wonderful asset to us that we protect him desperately. And he is a great asset. And I don't say that I get called out. They call this dog out. Because this dog, he will track anything. I can put him on a squirrel and he'll follow it to the tree. I can put him on a human. He'll follow the human. You see some of my videos with him. People laugh at me. I seen some comments. A lady was sent a comment earlier on my YouTube from this station here. But he's such an exceptional dog. But yeah, we do still get called out. I've been called out once already this year, and we're just now in January. But usually about 20, 30 times a year I'll get called out. And we don't charge. I don't believe in charging people to go Bigfoot or anything like that. I'm not out there to make money. That's the reason my podcast name's Poor Boys. For a reason.
Well, I've always wanted to know where do tracks lead to? What's your average kind of?
The farthest trackway I found of the target species and track was 3/4 of a mile, and you would not believe how closely it parallels the natural predators of the area. They hang around water sources. They're always walking halfway up and down ridges. They have bedding areas, and that's been a big thing for me is tracking them. I'm learning these bedding areas. They're always halfway up a ridge, usually with an overhang or a lot of cover over them. Cedar trees, conifers. They're collecting, and that's another thing people don't realize. They collect acorns. They eat acorns a lot. They eat a lot of the local fauna. Down here, they're big about getting cattails. They love the starchy bulbs at the bottom of cattails. They'll pull them up, eat them, and then literally I've not seen them physically do it, but I've seen where they pulled them up, eat them, and then stick them back in the ground to where it looks like that they haven't been there. And you'll go and be like, what in the world? Because the mud's torn up. You'll be knee deep in water. The mud's torn up, and you pick it up, and all the root bulbs are taken off of it, and they've stuck it back in the ground. So everything that they do is so patterned in the least impact we can do so people can't find us. They want to avoid us is what they do. It's just phenomenal.
Sorry, Danielle.
No, go on. You're all right.
In Oklahoma, I wanted to know do you find here in Washington State, I find what I don't think that every time a thick tree branch is broken that it's Sasquatch, but I do find the ones that are broken and twisted. And I'll find them. What I want to ask you is do you find those? And then if you do you find them in a straight line? What I mean by that is here's one, 20 yards over, here's another one.
And they're usually pointed the same direction.
They're not random. They're literally
pointed the same direction.
Straight direction. And we find that with those rock piles too, literally straight.
Yeah. And we're trying to figure that out. I found one trail like that led to a water source. Then I found another trail like that pointed towards a road. But the most interesting pattern that I found, I went out a couple of years ago with a great bunch of guys from here in Oklahoma. But I kind of stepped off on myself, and I found where one had thrown a fit and done like a bluff charge. And as he was running through, he was breaking stuff off. And you could literally tell which was right-handed, which was left-handed, because he's grabbing them like this and twisting them like this. Yeah. But there's so many different patterns. But yeah, I've seen those where they're all broke off in the same direction. I've got in my personal research area, they have a tendency to do that when the deer hunters are there. They'll get halfway up the ridge and they'll break them off and point them towards the deer stands. It's almost like a marker of don't go down there.
Ah, okay.
The biggest ones that I found I'm still trying to figure out is the X structures. I know y'all are getting some up there. We're getting a bunch of them down here. But it's went out a few years ago with a pretty well-known researcher by the name of Will Lungsford. Took me out, and he had found a dead carcass on the side of the road. And we was looking at it, and I got to looking, and there's a blatant trail across there. And I found an X structure on each side of the road, but it was funny because one was up closer to the road for some cover, and then one was farther away. And I literally got back there and stood behind where that X structure was and looked. And it was like if the headlights came around the bend of the road, of course, my military mind, if the headlights come through here, if I stand behind this, you can't see me. And then I was like, really? So I went across the road and found the other one, and it was closer up, but there were cedar trees blocking the path of the. So there's just so many. And folks, once again, this is all speculation, just my personal experience and personal opinion. But it's phenomenal that the information, once again, the information that we can glean from these guys' trails, and you can learn their behavior from their trails. And it's just a matter of getting the right skill set to be able to interpret this. And it's a losing, I'm sorry to say, now up where you're from, there's a lot more trackers and a lot more outdoorsmen, but us as a society have stepped away from that livelihood, so that we have a lot less people that can collect that data.
Yeah. And people need to learn a little bit more, don't they? Because it will help them.
Absolutely.
If they don't have these skills, or at least look into it, or, come to someone like you. What are you doing on your channel? Are you giving out kind of advice about tracking and things to look out for?
I got fed up with the community for a long time and pulled a bunch of our stuff down and left it alone. But these you folks have rejuvenated me, and we got this band of brothers. But yeah, we are doing tracking tutorials. We're doing evidence collecting tutorials. I mean, we've got some pretty high up military and law enforcement community forensic guys that we're just now starting to put them out. We put out our second episode last week of how to collect this evidence correctly, camera angles when you're taking pictures, and multiple carry little flags with you and mark your trailways and take a notebook and write stuff down. So yeah, we're just getting this ball rolling, and I'm hoping that folks can, if you can sit and listen to us talk for an hour and glean one bit of information, and it helps you gather better evidence, then what we've done is worth it. That's, to me, is the greatest thing for us. Is, if as a community, I love how Jay put it, and you put it the other day, Danielle, if we would quit trying to compete with each other and come together and put this stuff together in a scientific manner, we would be so much better in the community than being at everybody's throats and trying to be that guy,
Yeah.
I hate that attitude. I'm that guy. Well, I'm not. Yeah, I'm not. I don't want to be that guy. That guy is the target species. We need to get that awareness out there. I'm afraid we're going to lose them.
Yeah. A lot of the big egos about, unfortunately, and nobody's got the right answer. So we might as well just calm down a little bit and listen to each other. Because you could be right, you could be wrong, who knows? But
nobody's an expert. I mean, I have my personal opinion, but like I told you the other night, if a alien spaceship lands in front of me tomorrow and a Bigfoot steps out of it, I'm going to be the first one to go, holy crap, I was wrong. But just in the evidence that I've collected, why would something step through a portal, leave a footprint, and then go through another portal? If you can go through a portal, you don't need to leave footprints.
Well, that's what we think, isn't it? And that's the other thing, is we don't know. Maybe they do need to leave the footprint before the other portal opens.
Maybe they're doing it just to mess with us. We don't know. I mean, I'm the first one to lean, because I do, as you know, I do paranormal investigation too. And I have some of my best friends in the community. I mean, I call her my sweetheart. She's like my little sister, Miss Christy Sy out of Louisiana. She's a clairvoyant and talks to them. And we take her, and I'm telling you, she's been pretty spooky. I call her my little spook queen, because we'll be walking through the woods and she'll be like, there's something over there, and we go over there, and lo and behold, there's tracks.
So yeah,
there might be something there, but I haven't seen it yet.
Jay, I'm just looking through, see if we've got any questions. If anyone's got any questions, put them in caps, and it makes it a lot easier for me to see them. What do you feel about people that are gifting, especially with food? Is it such a good idea? Really?
That would be a whole nother show about my research area, because my father delivered food for our local school systems, and they would reject like whole pallets of food.
Right.
And his dumb butt, being in the wilderness as much as he is here in the South, Jay, we don't have the same mentality y'all do up north with bears. We don't hang our back food in the trees. We just throw it out. And he's been doing that for like 10 years. And that's, I think, what brought him in. But I don't condone it. You don't feed the bear. Matter of fact, I've got a sign in here that says, don't feed the Sasquatch. And then I've got to quote Mr. Brian or Duke out of Montana, Bigfoot, don't hug the Wookiee. You know, these guys are like a bear. I treat them. You're not going to walk out, oh, look at that big old pretty bear. I'm going to give you my hot dog. You know, no. If you are going to gift them something natural, because we don't know what the chemicals do to their system.
Right.
And we're going to discuss that tonight on the primitive life skills, is how the human body has changed and how we have trouble processing raw meat. Now, me, I'm different. I eat a paleo diet, and boy, do I eat a lot of it. But my system, I'll grab raw bacon and raw beef and chicken all the time. People's like, oh my God. Well, I do that to build up a tolerance to it. But we don't know what it does to their system. You know, everybody talks about I hear a lot of people giving them gifting them candy bars and peanut butter and jelly and stuff like that. Do you understand what happens when a bear loses its teeth? They get awful mean. So you give one of these guys and let them lose their teeth. How mean they're going to get?
You know, I only take up grains because grain is about the only thing. And I'm talking, my wife will actually make a special batch of cornbread with no sugar.
Yeah.
Just cornbread, and we'll take that up there. Hey, maybe the squirrels are eating it, but we take it up there specifically for them. She has baked them with no sugar, wild berry muffins, and we'll take those.
I do love condoning, and I do condone the mental stimulus side of things, trinkets, marbles, little stuff like that. And as long as it's natural, but I tell people, if you do that, be careful, especially if you quit, because I've heard so many times that these things get mad when you quit doing it, and then the next person comes along and we're literally dealing with it now because my dad, I finally talked it into my dad to quit putting the food out there, and they built better fences and they haul it off. And now they're getting well, that'll be for another show, but adverse behavior we talked about before that happened. But I don't feel like I should do it. I like the whole Jane Goodall thing. When I go into the woods to research, I make the smallest imprint I can. I don't go hooping. I've done 3 wood knocks in my life on 3 separate occasions, and I've gleaned 3 different responses. We just ease in, sit down, because you're not going to ease into their woods without them knowing it.
That's right.
They're going.
I had a really interesting question then, and it's completely gone out of my head, so I'm going to have to keep rambling for a little bit until I remember what I had to say. It was really interesting as well.
Here's one. I do got to answer this one. Anything interesting coming from P3 in the new year? Folks, we're fixing to blow this thing open. Let's just say that in the airborne, we used to say death from above. Well, in the very near future, it's fixing to be information from above. This fella's really got something going on. FLIR footage, FLIR drone capabilities is I honestly think is going to be the next get us over that hurdle.
Yeah, we need to step a bit further forward with this subject and research investigation, whichever way you want to call it, simply because it's been going on for too long and we're not really getting any further with learning.
Like spinning our wheels.
And it's no disrespect. I keep saying it to anyone who's out there doing it, good for them. But I'd like to go take it further. I want to know more. And, it's how are we going to do this? I wish I could think of what I was going to say because it was a really interesting. I should have wrote it down. I forgot to write it down.
Yeah, and you're the one teaching me. Write it down.
I know.
On the gifting thing, I tell people all the time, you don't let your kids take food from a stranger. Why would a family of these be any different? Go ahead.
I remembered it now. If just because of your skill set with being out in the woods and the tracking and that, what would you think Bigfoot could survive on would be the good things, the berries, the roots, the herbs. What's out there where you are?
Where I'm at,
Yeah.
I have yet to find an environment where these are very well known to be that I couldn't survive on my own with a certain skill set. Like I was saying earlier, with the acorns, pine nuts. Down here, we're in a lot of swampy area. Cattails. True story. My wife got sick from heat exhaustion. We'd been drinking a little bit. Was canoeing down the river. I reeled over in the pine. In the cattails, and I said, pull up get that starchy stuff at the bottom, eat it, and it'll fix you. She was vomiting. 30 minutes later, she was fine. Yeah. Where I'm at, pine nuts, big time. They love pine nuts. You can, in a survival situation, cedar. You take cedar, boil it in a tea, and drink it. It helps keep you warm. You've got acorns. You got snakes. That's another thing, too. It takes a lot of protein and a lot of energy to hunt down a deer, unless you have a gun or a bow and arrow. Squirrel, raccoon, possum, snake, eggs. That's another thing that I've literally seen evidence of. Down here we have a lot of chicken farms. It's easier to survive down here than it is in the Pacific Northwest where you're at, Jay, because we have so many farms. They can step off in a garden. One of my favorite things to do when I hit our farm is I take me a paper plate and my and my pocket knife, and I hit the garden. Raw corn, okra, cabbage, all that. And they can come in and pick off what they want and leave, and 90% of the time, nobody ever knows it because they don't think to look at the tracks. You got ponds, fish. There's so many reports coming from down here, especially all the way down into Alabama, Mississippi, and Louisiana, where they say, oh, they're washing their hands. No, they're not. They're noodling. They're grappling. It's what we do. Reach up there and grab you a catfish. Had a real good conversation with a biologist, Mr. Dan Nadrelio, out of Wisconsin. We talked all night long one day, and I asked him because he's a herpetologist. And I asked him a very question. I said, in any of your highly active areas, have you seen a lot of snakes? He goes, hardly any. I said, because they eat them. Because that's one of the first things we eat is in a survival. The Pacific Northwest, you've got all your gooseberries, you've got raspberries, you've got the blackberries. Down here, you got blackberries, hollyberries, you got all, and that's not included down here. We got something what we call poke, which grows around brush piles. Once you get your system tuned, you can eat it raw. Us as humans, we have to boil it because it's poisonous. But these guys will eat Johnson grass, dandelions.
There's a lot, isn't there? There's a lot. Keep him going. I'm just going to go back to tracks. It's just something that came into my head that I remember today. Is what do you feel? Some people say that Sasquatch, they know people are looking for them, so they walk back in their tracks. What do you feel about that?
I haven't seen that, but it's funny you said that because I had a long conversation with my tracking partner Patrick today. I've physically seen them go across rocks. I've seen them get in. I tell people, if you really want to track a Sasquatch, put yourself in a criminal mindset to where if I didn't want to be found as a bipedal human, what would I do to hide my tracks? And I can honestly say that if your skill set is halfway decent, about 60% of the time you'll find something walking on logs.
But who are they evading? Who are they trying to keep away from? Maybe humans, hunters, but are they in that mindset all the time, do you think? Are they not just... I think it changes because the deeper I get into southeastern Oklahoma, because that's, kind of my research area, I see that behavior not as prevalent. We seem to find more tracks out there. I guarantee you 90% of the tracks that people say they find, the big 17, 18, are usually young males, which are more blatant. They don't really care, just in my personal opinion. But around these farms and stuff where I'm at, you see them walking in cattle trails. They'll follow cattle trails. It's a perfect, because cattle are so predictable. They'll go up and down that same trail all day long. So you might go in there in the middle of the day and see fresh tracks and then come back in the afternoon and here come the cattle again. So they'll pattern themselves up them trails.
but I don't know in the Pacific Northwest because I haven't got to spend an extended amount of time up there. But it's so vast up there. But their substrate up there is less conducive of finding tracks because of all the fern and the pine mat.
That's correct.
Well, that's interesting. Look, we're coming up to the end of the hour, but we're going to carry this conversation on, and I'm going to talk about it a bit more. If you come over and meet us in about 15 minutes, there'll be another show starting. Gary will be there. Jay's going to be there. And a couple of other people are going to turn up. I've been talking to to Jay and Jason and Leon, and usually when we have these shows, we end up talking for maybe an hour or two after the shows, and sometimes we have the best conversations about Sasquatch and all sorts of things. I mean, they're absolutely gold, some of them. And so I want to share that with you guys. So tonight we're going to do that. We're just going to go live straight after. I know a couple of people are going to join us as well. And I think you might see a different side to the way we think about these shows and what we think about the subject. We go a little bit deeper. Anyway, that's what we're going to do. So if you want to join us, I'll be going live in about 15 minutes. There'll be a link coming up soon. Yeah, I'll talk to you guys shortly. Thanks to everyone in the chat, everyone watching. Yeah, we'll see you in a little bit. Until the next time, bye-bye.